Richard Hale here. Something happened this week that almost nobody is talking about, and the silence says more than the headlines ever could. In the middle of a cabinet meeting, during what was supposed to be a routine display of power and control, something shifted. The tone changed. The energy changed. And even longtime allies in the media didn't seem comfortable carrying it live. When the people who usually amplify you suddenly pull back, that's not a production error. That's a signal. Tonight we're breaking down what really unfolded, what it reveals about power, legacy, and control, and why this moment may be far bigger than one meeting or one speech. If you value sharp political analysis that connects the dots others ignore, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because understanding the pattern is the only way to see where this is headed. Let's get into it. Something truly remarkable occurred this week. Donald Trump conducted a cabinet meeting. You know, the kind of orchestrated gatherings where he sits at an absurdly long table encircled by yes-men, agreeing with whatever nonsense he utters. But this time, things didn't unfold as expected, because halfway through his incoherent comments on trade agreements and imaginary economic successes, Fox News did something they rarely do. They cut away. They simply stopped broadcasting it, switched to a commercial, and returned with a Fox News update about virtually anything else. Now, when your own propaganda channel, the network that spent years defending your every statement, justifying your every wrongdoing, sanitizing your every authoritarian impulse, decides they can't show you to their viewers anymore, that says everything about our current situation. This isn't Fox safeguarding Trump. This is Fox shielding their audience from Trump, because what they observed in that cabinet room was a man in clear, undeniable mental and physical decline. And even they understand you can't spin what's obvious to everyone. Let's examine what truly happened in that meeting, because the clips that did leak out are genuinely alarming. Trump tried to interpret recent economic data, and I use the term interpret loosely here. What he actually did was ramble off random numbers, mix up countries with corporations, and at one point completely lost track of his point mid-sentence. He stated, and I quote, "We're bringing back $400 billion, maybe $500 billion, some say $600 billion from China, from Canada, from the European Union, which is essentially Germany, if you think about it. And nobody has ever seen numbers like this, the biggest numbers in history. None of this makes any sense. Those aren't policy positions. That's not even spin. That's a man grasping at numbers he believes sound impressive while being utterly clueless about what he's actually talking about. But it's not just the words. Observe his physical demeanor, the way he clutches the table, the way he leans forward as if needing the furniture to stay upright, the way his aides, Caroline Leavitt, Stephen Miller, whoever's present, watch him like nurses monitoring a patient, ready to step in if necessary. And afterward, he didn't take questions. He didn't approach the press pool. His team hurried him out of there as swiftly as his declining body could manage, because they all know. Here's what's become crystal clear. Donald Trump's staff isn't serving him anymore. They're managing him. There's a distinction. Compare his public exposure now to his initial term. Back then, whether you liked him or not, the man was everywhere. Daily press briefings, hour-long unscripted rants. He'd stand in front of Marine One and just talk. Stream of consciousness, sure, but he was present. Now he scarcely appears. When he does, it's heavily scripted. Teleprompter for comments that would have been off the cuff in 2017, pre-screened questions only, limited media access, and the instant anything deviates from the script, they pull him. Why? Because the people surrounding him, Stephen Miller, Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, aren't working for Donald Trump's agenda anymore. They're pursuing their own while he deteriorates in real time. There was recent reporting about Miller running a separate communication channel with Trump, feeding him information throughout the day, essentially creating a shadow command structure that bypasses the official White House. That's not staff loyalty. That's a power grab. That's someone positioning themselves as the actual decision maker, while the nominal president declines. Elon Musk has openly contradicted Trump's statements on policy. J.D. Vance is already doing separate interviews portraying himself as the administration's steady hand. These individuals aren't serving Trump. They're exploiting him. They're enriching themselves, advancing their separate agendas, playing the markets based on insider information, and waiting for the inevitable moment when he's too far gone to stop them. Donald Trump has become a figurehead in his own administration, and everyone around him knows it. But here's where it becomes truly revealing. Here's where Trump's psychological state becomes impossible to ignore. You might have heard about this. Donald Trump is currently holding federal infrastructure funding hostage, specifically funding for the Gateway Project, crucial transportation infrastructure for the Northeast, in exchange for getting his name on Dallas Airport and Penn Station in New York. Read that again. The President of the United States is extorting a sitting Senator, Chuck Schumer, to rename public infrastructure after himself. Now, on its face, this is pathetic. It's the behavior of a malignant narcissist who never received enough love as a child. But it's more than that, because when you examine the pattern of Trump's actions these past few months, a picture emerges. And that picture is of a man in absolute panic about his legacy. He renamed the Kennedy Center to include his own name, the John F. Kennedy and Donald J. Trump Center for the Performing Arts. He couldn't even let JFK have that alone. He's commissioned a massive arch in Washington, D.C., a literal monument to himself that historians have compared to the kind of vanity projects built by Saddam Hussein and Stalin in their final years. He's trying to rename military bases, government buildings, any structure with federal funding attached. Why? Why this sudden obsession with monuments? Because history shows us that when autocrats sense the end, whether it's political, physical, or both, they accelerate their monument building. Saddam Hussein's palace construction went into overdrive in the late 1990s, when sanctions isolated him. Stalin's cult of personality intensified as his paranoia and health declined in his final years. It's a pattern. When dictators know their time is limited, they try to cement themselves in stone because they understand something fundamental. They've lost control of their narrative, and Trump knows he's lost control. You can see it in his posts. You can hear it in his recent rhetoric. He started this week, I am not making this up, talking about whether he's going to get into heaven. Just posted it out of nowhere. The Snort's fake news keeps reporting that I said I'm not going to heaven. It was a joke. But they report it seriously because they're nasty people who want to make me look bad. First of all, nobody was reporting that. He brought it up himself. He's the one who can't stop thinking about it. Second, Donald Trump, a man who never spoke about God except to pander to evangelicals, who couldn't name a single Bible verse, who famously said he's never asked God for forgiveness, is now obsessed with divine judgment. That's not politics. That's psychology. That's a man confronting his own mortality and realizing that no amount of propaganda can change what's coming. There are reports from inside Mar-a-Lago that he's been having conversations about his funeral, about how he'll be remembered, about what they'll say about him after he's gone. He's negotiating with history in real time, and he's losing. You want to know the most perfect metaphor for Trump's legacy panic? The Kennedy Center closure? After Trump forced his name onto the building, after he held that grand renaming ceremony, after he stood there grinning like he'd accomplished something meaningful, the Kennedy Center shut down, just closed indefinitely. Now officially, they cited renovations and restructuring. But let's be honest about what happened. Donald Trump couldn't bear the idea that his name would share space with an actual president's legacy, a president who's remembered for vision, for eloquence, for sacrifice. So rather than let the comparison stand, rather than risk the monument not receiving the adoration he demanded, he just closed it, took his ball, and went home. And here's my prediction. Write it down. Check back in 10 years. Every monument Trump builds right now will become a source of shame. Hotels will scrub the Trump name to avoid boycotts. Some already have. Buildings will be renamed. The arch will be torn down or repurposed. His own children will distance themselves from the brand. Some already are. The monuments he's desperately trying to build aren't going to preserve his legacy. They're going to become tourist attractions for mockery. People will visit Trump's folly the way they visit Confederate monuments, not to honor, but to remember what we overcame. Donald Trump senses this. He knows this. And it's eating him alive. But here's the thing. This isn't just about one old man's vanity, this monument obsession, this legacy panic. It's connected to something much darker. It's connected to what his administration is trying to hide. Because at the exact same time, Trump is trying to build monuments to himself. His administration is systematically erasing other people's history, specifically Black history. It started immediately. Day one of this administration, the DEI rollbacks, the Smithsonian purges, the curriculum changes, forcing schools to remove discussions of slavery, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement from American history classes. Remember the Enola Gay incident? They ran a Control-F search for the word gay in Federal Museum archives and just started deleting things. Removed an entire exhibit about the plane that dropped the atomic bomb because the word gay appeared in its name. That's the level of incompetence we're dealing with. But it's incompetence in service of a very specific goal, historical erasure. Now, a lot of people rightfully said, of course, Trump wants to erase Black history. He's a racist. His administration is filled with white supremacists. They don't want those stories told. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. Because the reason they're erasing Black history isn't just bigotry, it's strategy. Fascism requires historical amnesia. Authoritarianism cannot function if people remember how it works, what it looks like, who it targets, and how it's been resisted before. There was a podcast conversation recently between Andrew Schultz and Charlemagne, the god that perfectly captured this dynamic. Schultz, who, let's remember, defended Trump, made excuses for Trump, told people they were overreacting about Trump, was now expressing shock at what he's seeing. I never thought I'd see this in America, he said. People being shot in the streets by federal agents, families being torn apart, thugs with badges just hunting people down for no reason. And Charlemagne said something so simple, so obvious, so devastating. You never thought it would happen to white people. Because here's the reality. This is American history. This has always been American history. Where do you think policing in America comes from? Slave patrols. That's it. That's the origin story. Armed men empowered by the state to hunt down Black bodies, return them to captivity, terrorize communities into submission. That's where American policing started. The ICE raids happening right now. Agents breaking into homes without warrants, tearing families apart, disappearing people into detention centers. That's not new. That's a photocopy of fugitive slave laws. Federal agents empowered to hunt human beings across state lines and return them to bondage. The militarized police beating protesters in the streets. The surveillance state tracking activists. The criminalization of mutual aid. Black Americans have been experiencing this for 400 years. Indigenous Americans wrote the manual in blood. What's happening now isn't Trump inventing American authoritarianism. It's American authoritarianism finally coming for everyone. And that's why they need to erase Black history. Because if Americans knew that history, if they really understood it, they'd recognize what's happening right now. If we knew Frederick Douglass, we'd know how to speak truth to power. If we knew Harriet Tubman, we'd know how to build underground networks of resistance. If we knew Ida B. Wells, we'd know how to document atrocities and force the country to confront them. If we knew Fannie Lou Hamer, We'd know how to organize at the grassroots level and challenge corrupt systems. If we knew the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program, we'd know how to build mutual aid networks that make us less dependent on a government that wants us desperate. If we knew the labor movements led by Afip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, we'd know how to shut down the economy when power refuses to listen. They're not erasing history because they hate the past. They're erasing it because they fear an informed future. They're terrified that if you knew how Black Americans resisted slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, you'd know exactly how to resist them. That's why Trump's monument building and history erasing are two sides of the same authoritarian coin. Build monuments to the regime, erase monuments to resistance, control the past, control the future. Except it's not going to work. Because here's what Donald Trump can't seem to understand. His legacy is already written. It's done, finished. No amount of marble or alabaster or renamed airports is going to change it. January 6th will be studied for centuries, not as a patriotic uprising, not as a protest gone wrong, but as a fascist coup attempt by a president who refused to accept electoral defeat. Your face will be next to the word insurrection in history textbooks forever. Your COVID response, telling people to inject bleach, holding super spreader rallies while hundreds of thousands died, dismantling pandemic preparedness because Obama built it. That's your legacy, your family separation policy, children in cages, toddlers representing themselves in immigration court, thousands of families permanently destroyed. That's your legacy. Your 2 impeachments, your 34 felony convictions, your sexual assault adjudication, your fraud convictions, your theft of classified documents. That's your legacy. Future generations aren't going to ask, was Trump a great president? They're going to ask, how the poor twin did Americans fall for this twice? Your name isn't going to be synonymous with greatness. It's going to be synonymous with American decline, democratic backsliding, and the con. Artist who almost destroyed the republic. Every monument you build is one more thing to tear down. Every name you slap on a building is one more reminder to scrub away. Every arch you commission is one more structure future generations will demolish. That's your actual legacy, and you can't change it. But you want to know what the real monument to this era will be. It's not going to be your arch. It's not going to be your renamed airport. It's going to be the resistance. The millions of women who marched the day after your inauguration and kept marching. The sanctuary cities that refused to become extensions of your deportation force. The election workers who defended democracy while you sicked a mob on them. The journalists you called enemies of the people who kept reporting truth anyway. The lawyers who filed lawsuit after lawsuit to stop your worst abuses. The mutual aid networks that fed people when your government shut down. The young people organizing climate strikes while you gutted environmental protections. The families torn apart by ICE who are fighting to be reunited. The trans kids you tried to erase who refused to disappear. That's the monument. That's what's going to be taught. Not your buildings, not your speeches, but the fact that millions of Americans looked at your authoritarianism and said, no, not here, not us, not ever. The monument to this era is every person who resisted, and that monument is being built right now in real time by all of us. Which brings me back to Chuck Schumer and that airport naming scheme. Senator Schumer, you have one job right now, one very simple job. Do not negotiate with terrorists. Do not build monuments to tyrants. Do not give this man one more inch of legacy preservation while he's actively dismantling American democracy. The answer to Trump's extortion should be simple. No. Build the Gateway Project, because it's critical infrastructure, and you can name it after the workers who built it, not the wannabe dictator who held it hostage. This is a test not just for Schumer, for every Democrat who claims to be resisting. Are you actually going to resist, or are you going to compromise with fascism because it's easier? But more than that, this is a test for all of us, because Trump's team is counting on our exhaustion. They're counting on our amnesia. They're counting on us to forget how we got here and who showed us the way out. So, here's what we do. We document everything, every abuse, every lie, every crime. We create the record they're trying to erase. We learn the history they're trying to hide. Read Frederick Douglass. Read James Baldwin. Read IDB. Wells. Read the scholars they're purging from universities. Learn the resistance strategies they don't want you to know. And we build the counter-narrative right now while they're still in power. So that when this era ends, and it will end, the history that gets taught is the true one. Not Trump's fantasy, not his monuments, but the real story of what happened and how we survived it. They want us to forget. Our job is to remember everything. If you made it this far, you're part of the resistance. You're part of that counter-monument we're building, and I hope you'll keep building it with me. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a like on this video. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments so I know you're out there fighting. Chuck Schumer, do the right thing. No airports, no monuments, no negotiations with autocrats. And to everyone else, keep fighting, keep documenting, keep learning the history they're trying to erase. They're counting on your silence. Don't give it to them.